Hello.
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 Hi, Monica. Hi, Pat. What a wonderful way to establish this.
Yeah.
This is a great introduction. So we're going to get underway, and I'll adopt maybe a more formal tone. So, good evening, everyone. Matthew Fava here with the members of the Ensemble for another episode of NightCAPS. So really delighted to be joining and to be joined by two wonderful composers, friends and colleagues of mine, and new and burgeoning friends and colleagues of the Ensemble as well, Monica Pearce and Patricia Morehead. So thank you both for joining. One of the things I wanted to acknowledge is that this episode of NightCAPS is receiving support from the Association for Canadian Women Composers, and we wanted to kind of maybe bridge this topic a little bit, this topic of representation in our field. And so, but what I'm really interested to hear from each of you is, given this context, this imbalance in representation in our field, in particular among composers, the creative voices that are shaping a lot of the content, I'd love to hear about the exciting, the ambitious, and the inspiring examples that you've encountered in your works who are really challenging conventional boundaries of the art forms, who are unlocking new potential by bringing diverse musical practices, aesthetic practices, career experiences together. So if you can share these examples, the examples that give you hope for a more curious, a more complex, a more creative curatorial approach. And maybe I'll start with you, Monica, and then we'll kind of zigzag a little bit.
Sure. So I think one of the most hopeful, I guess, examples that happened to me personally and really kind of was very influential, I guess, was when I was in third year of university. I came to Toronto and I met with a number of composers, and one of them was Linda Catlin Smith.
Mm.
And she just agreed to meet with me, and I interviewed her and I hadn't really talked with many women composers at that point, and I was sort of tiptoeing into composition, but I wasn't really sure. And when I talked with her, she's so lovely and smart and artistic and everything. And she really just was like, I don't think she said, like, you don't need to ask permission, but I think she was just like, keep going with it, like, see where it goes. And that was very influential to me, just to have to see someone be successful, and also to be like, hey, you could do this too, just do it, like, what are you waiting for, right?
Yeah.
You're waiting to be an expert on this.
And I'm really glad you brought up the story about Linda, because I feel like Linda is someone who is this star in the sky of so many composers. So it's just really lovely to invoke that spirit. Pat, for yourself, is there a particular curator, organization, someone or something that you look to that you feel does inspiring work to broaden the field of composition, to broaden the voices involved in composition?
Well, the woman once again, it's a woman. I heard her music and I loved it. Her name is Ruth Lohman in Boston, and I asked her to write me a piece, and she's written me two wonderful pieces. She's since died, but she's the one that suggested that I understood her music so well that I should write music myself. So she really sort of planted a seed, which didn't really begin to grow until I moved to Toronto to study with Dr. Samuel Dolan. And actually, when I was studying with Sam, the very first Association of Canadian Women Composers had their first concert in Guelph.
Okay.
And I went and played Ruth Lohman's piece at this concert.
Amazing.
And I was just a baby steps composer at the time, but that was the very early days with the beginnings of ACWC, with Carolyn Lomax and my brain has gone
Are we
soft.
thinking like Mary Gardner and Southam?
Mary Gardner and Southam, yes. And
Yeah.
I met those women for the first time. I met a whole group of women composers at that concert, which it's that kind of sorority that gives you the courage to keep going.
Yeah.
That was very important for me. And so at one point I became the first non-American composer, American president, non-American president of International Alliance of Women in Music, which
Right.
was funny because when I became the president, oh well, you're an American. I said, no, I'm not. I'm Canadian. And they said, well, that's the same thing. And I said, no, it's not the same thing.
Really not.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. So, Monica, I'm wondering if you can walk us through your inspiration for leather. So at this point, you've got several pieces in the textile series, and so I think it's so chainmail, denim. I've got the list here: velvet, silks, toile de joie. Please correct my pronunciation. Houndstooth. I don't know if I'm missing some. Is that everything?
There's 8, and I think you said 6, and then leather. There's one more.
Damask?
Damask.
Okay.
Wow, very good.
Awesome. So where has this series been taking you? You know, like I'd love to know how your process has developed around it. You know, this kind of recurring engagement with textile as the organizing principle for the piece. If you can give us some insight to the series before we dive into leather specifically.
Yeah, so in 2015, I had 3 kind of projects that were kind of came up all around the same time. One of them was a percussion quartet. One of them was the piano solo, and the other one was Damask, which is the toy piano and tabla piece. And so these were all kind of like very like not related at all. But at the time, I was really itching to work on something more long term and a longer project, because they were all going to be around like the 8 to 10 minute mark. And at that point, I was kind of like, I kind of want something that's going to be that I can really dig into for several years. So then I came up with the idea of textile fantasies, where each of the pieces would be, they would have a piano and percussion kind of angle in some way, and then would be inspired by either a certain textile or pattern, usually by working with the musical material in like the kind of pattern or the different quirks of it, or the connotations of its history, or just in any kind of way to tie to the idea of textiles. And so with leather, it was probably my 5th or 6th one, I think. And I wanted to work with something really, really low in the piano, because I had done something from a previous piece for harp, Attach, which where there was a lot of really, really low patterny kind of stuff, where you can get the pitches, but they're not quite. You're getting the rhythm and a little bit of the pitches, but it's not completely clear. So I wanted to work with that. But then also have it be more metallic. It's like such like a weird composer way of thinking. But anyway, so I wanted that, and then I knew I wanted to work with metals again. I had done that with chainmail, and so when I was talking with Ben Reimer, who I was writing it for, and Vicky Chow, he told me that he had these cymbals and he played them for me, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna work with that, and I know I want to work with gongs again. So I kind of wanted to create this sort of low, slightly muted, but metallic, kind of like combined sound.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then so in the piece there's a strip of leather that's woven in the bottom few strings of the piano, and then the connotation of leather being like, you know, very tough and durable, you know, and can really like, you know, be very strong, and just like everything around that was sort of bound up in it as well.
And just a question, I put this question to you earlier because I was caught by it, that the tempo marking quarter note equals 60, and it says industrial strength in the score. What's the idea behind industrial strength?
I'm always doing stuff like that. I just like people are I love having like a tempo marking that just like is more for the imagination than it is for an actual direction. Like,
okay,
industrial strength meaning like it's like, you know, to the max. Basically.
Okay. Lovely.
Whatever that means to you. Well, yeah, I could sometimes be a little bit ridiculous with some of my indications. So I'm sort of surprised people haven't called me out on it more often because,
Okay.
but
Okay.
it is like, it's more so a tool, like I say, for the imagination for people to be like, okay, does it mean like, should I go here? Like, am I,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks, Monica. And Pat, I'm going to turn to you next. I'd love to get some insights into this piece, Moon on Shimmering Water. I'm not as familiar with the context of this. Can you tell me a little bit more? Is it something that you've written recently, and maybe just talking about your writing process for the piece?
I wrote this especially for the ensemble.
Mm.
I should say ensemble.
I like doing this when I say the name as well. Yeah.
I decided it'd be fun to mix I think of the marimba as a rather relatively gentle instrument with a beautiful color.
Mm.
And so I thought of this as, to be a very meditative piece. Uh, it's a gentle piece about the design, the designs that the moon creates on the water
Mm.
when there's a gentle breeze blowing across the lake on a late summer evening. And then when I put my feet in the water and make ripples,
Yeah.
and what the moon, the interface of the moon with the ripples in the water, I thought could be ideally um, portrayed between the piano and the marimba. And so in order to capture some of this motion, I used grace notes and tremolos in both the piano and the marimba, and arpeggiated figures going in different directions on the piano to go with the beautiful, gentle colors of the
Mm.
marimba. So, and at the end of the piece, there's a little bit of my Chicago history. There's a little hint of a jazz melody
Okay.
at the end, and that's kind of my Chicago connection between the northern waters and the fact that when one's in the north and communing with nature, it's kind of a wonderful experience. Not something, it's not a kind of piece I would have written in Chicago. It's a piece I could only have written by moving up north. And it was written
Mm.
especially for this concert. Thanks to Zach, we eliminated the fact that he doesn't have 6 hands.
My misconception.
And he came up with good solutions. I had a feeling that there were more hands needed than I had allowed for. But in any case, it's thanks to Zach and Adana that it'll get its premiere. So I haven't heard it live. I've heard it, of course, in my electronic machine, but the live performance I'm very much looking forward to.
Mhm. Well, I do find it interesting to see some of the descriptors that Monica offered around leather and then some of the descriptors that you're offering, Pat, around this piece. I think it'll be very interesting to have these pieces meet together in this program. From my end, as the moderator of this discussion, I do want to thank the ensemble, Zach and Adana, but a huge thanks to Monica and Pat for spending this time with us and being so generous as always, as expected, but just sharing all these lovely stories about your career, your experiences, your inspirations. It is an inspiration to hear from you both. So thank you both for this.